What's up, guys? Real quick before we dive into today's episode, I simply want to apologize for any malfunctions that we have during today's episode. Around the 6 minute mark, we actually lose connection for just a few seconds with Magnus, and so I apologize for that. And then through the rest of this episode, though, it goes pretty smoothly. We are obviously filming this as well, so you can watch it on YouTube. And during today's episode, for the first part, I have it set to where you can see each person's face fully in the screen. And then in the second half, I have it set to where you can see both of us talking at the same time. And so let me know if you're watching which one you prefer. Do you prefer to see just one person's face on the screen at a time when we're talking in these podcast series? Or you prefer to see us side by side with our videos live? So as I said, let me know what you prefer. We're always looking to ways to improve this podcast, whether you're listening or watching. And so whatever you can do to make it more enjoyable for you, feel free to share what those are in the comments down below. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and let's get into it. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. I'm super stoked to be here with you guys again today. Today we're starting a brand new series focused more or less on Indoor SUP, which is a training tool from Kona Sports in Sweden. But even more than that, this series is more about our growth and journey as paddleboarders. We learn to improve our techniques, our skills, and even deeper than all of that, even our health as humans, as we're trying to just keep our bodies healthy and fit as well in just everyday general life. So we're going to be doing a lot in this series. We'll have a lot of new topics talking about over the course of this series that we're stoked about. And today, as you probably see, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm joined by Magnus from Kona Sports, and he'll be joining me in these conversations during this series. So I'm super stoked about that. I've been talking with Magnus for quite a few sessions now over the past few months as he's helped me get to know the Indoor SUP better, and even just talking about, as we said, technique and health and everything like that. So really enjoyed talking with my time with Magnus and learning from him. So I know that you guys will enjoy it as well. And so today's episode is really just focused on our SUP stories. We kind of wanted to start here with this series to give just you guys just a better idea of who we are and where we're coming from and just our backgrounds in paddleboarding and life as well. And I feel like through this story time just helps people like you guys hopefully connect better with us to see that we're also not perfect. We also started at a beginning stage at one point in our journey as well in paddleboarding, and how that journey has led us to where we are today has sometimes been years, or just multiple years in time of putting on experience on the water and off the water. And so to show you guys that even where we are today, we did not start here yesterday. We've been doing this for a long time now on a journey of learning and improving ourselves. And that journey is still continuing. We're not just saying we're here with all the answers either. Like, we're here to continue learning this journey with you guys, continue improving in our skills as well. So hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. We share more of our personal stories and hopefully allow you guys to connect better with who we are also. So today we're going to start off more with Magnus' side of the story. Magnus is, as I said, is with Kona Sports there in Sweden, has a background in sports science, and has been actually involved in the racing side of stand-up paddleboarding, the coaching side, and has been very successful on all sides of that. So I know from my personal self, I'm excited to hear more of his story and just hear how his journey has been going in stand-up paddleboarding. And so, Magnus, take it away. I would love to hear even just what got you into stand-up paddleboarding at the very beginning and what that first part of your story is like of how you entered the world of paddleboarding.
That may be a little bit different from most people, actually, but this was around 2010. And a friend of mine had bought a board, and I was looking at him standing on that, and I suddenly realized that I've been working with a lot of individuals, helping them with performance and so on, and organizations, like in special forces and so on. And what I could see here is that he was actually, he couldn't really control this. A lot of his what we call protection reflexes was showing and so on. And so for me, it became an optimal tool for behavior analysis. So that's actually how it started. So I've been using like exposing people to heights and stuff like that before, just to let them not be able to hide any of their behaviors. In that way, we took it on myself and wanted to see what is this actually? What type of activity is it?
Mm.
In the same time, I was working with the Swedish Sport Confederation, and so I started to work with that to analyze just the stand-up, the activity of stand-up paddling. So that's where more or less where we started.
Wow. And so as you dove into the world as well, is that kind of why you're more interested in SUP over other sports? Because you can kind of pick out, I guess you could say, the things that could be worked on with people in terms of their abilities and their movement, or like, why did you choose SUP over other sports? I guess I could say.
That was when I started to train it myself and start to test it. And for me, first, I have a background as a wave surfer, so that was the idea of it from the beginning, to be able to surf in smaller waves and so on. But gradually, I realized that what happened with me when I was out on the water, standing on an unstable surface, as a SUP is more or less. I started to notice things about myself that I haven't been that I haven't seen in other activities. So that was the first thing that got me really hooked. And more or less that I wasn't able to control myself in that way that I wanted. So I started to look into it even more and try to find why is this happening.
So you're kind of in the world of stand-up paddleboarding at that time, understanding how the mechanics work behind the sport. You have some background in surf, so I'm sure that kind of helped you a little bit in terms of your balance on the board. You know, for many of us, you start paddleboarding with zero surf background, it can be more of a challenge. So what would you say was the first and hardest learning curve when it came to stand-up paddleboarding? What would you say that was for you?
Remember the second time I was out, tried it in no winds and waves, and found it a really good, very gentle motion compared to other sports. It was very, you can really apply power without any shock forces and so on your body. So I got a little bit cocky, so I took it, paddled around an island. So the second session was maybe, I would say, like 6 miles or something. And when I entered, when I was paddling around this island, I was out in the open sea and got hit by the waves. So and mostly side swell. So I had actually to sit down to take into more calm sea.
Yeah.
And so that was the first that hit me. Okay, well.
Yeah.
There's something more about this.
Yeah, I can totally relate with that side chop, especially for when you're in your beginning stages of paddleboarding. That's a challenge. Like that side movement, man, is that hard to work with. So yeah, like I said, sometimes the best thing to do is to sit down. I'm like, all right, let's just take this easier and figure it out, and then we'll try again later, kind of a thing. But that's great.
Yeah.
When you did your first race, what was that experience like for you? Did you walk away from that experience like in a positive mindset, in a defeated mindset? Like how was that first experience for you when you did your first race?
I'm working with sports, and I work with over over 30 different sports over the years, and so I've been focusing on the performance and economic part of it, like focusing on techniques and why we do different things and why that is better than other ways of doing it. So I was starting, I think I was like 43 or something when I started, that was my first race, maybe the year after that or something. So, you know, I didn't have any ideas of any performance. So I wanted to see if the technique that I worked with was working even during a competition. So I didn't really think anything special about how I would end up and so on. But what I realized that there was things in the competition environment that provoked me even more, because during training I could focus on myself and my technique and how I handled everything. But then, you know, we used to call it stress testing. Then you expose yourself to a more demanding environment. In this case was the competition. And I think I fell in and all these things and realized that, there's so many things I need to look into in this way, because I think it was beach starts and everything. So that's the old battle of paddle type of race.
Yep. Did you do the battle paddle in the past?
No, unfortunately not. I have friends that did it, and so on. All the data and experience from them, but unfortunately, I couldn't go over to participate. So yeah, that was a shame, but it's how it is.
Yeah, no, for sure. Can't make all the races.
No,
especially nowadays, there's a lot around the world. Yeah. So you're saying the hardest part then, race challenge, was just learning the environment of the racing environment in terms of like the beach starts or the movement on the water from other paddlers being on the water and things like that. I think that was kind of the biggest challenge then for the first few races, correct?
absolutely. You know, with all the turnings, the buoys and the waves combined and so on. So that was a really, you know, not humbling experience, because I know about this before, but just to realize how it felt and how you handle it.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, training on your own time or on your own by yourself on the water versus being around other paddlers is a way different experience. And yeah, like you can be like, you probably know, on a flat water location for a race, but that water is not going to be flat at the very beginning of the race with all the paddlers around you. It's going to be moving and it can throw you off balance. And so, yeah, I definitely can relate with that. Yeah, I remember my first few races as well. Just that first start of the race, just taking off, and like, man, it's so hard just to balance the first part of the race because everyone around you is paddling. You're trying not to hit other boards around you. You're trying not to fall off balance from the wake of the other paddlers. So it is quite the experience. It's a comical one sometimes.
It is, but in the same time, it's interesting. If you don't, you know, if you focus more on what you're doing in this situation more than you know, more that you're afraid of, you know, showing your inabilities. That I think you learn from every type of similar situation. So that's what I take with me. I try not to value what I try not to have to any, you know, what to see is there any results I want to reach and so on. Instead, just focusing on how can I focusing on what I've been doing or what I've been training. And so therefore I think every experience is equally useful or equally important. And so all these things I take with me and then go back and try to see, okay, I need to train this. How can I do that in the most effective way? So therefore, I think most people are afraid of, you know, exposing them in front of others.
Yeah.
And then that will be very limiting for their development. And this is more or less what I try to teach people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. I definitely agree with it. I even know for myself, people who are listening, watching this as a content creator, put a lot of my personal flaws out there sometimes, and I'm like, wait, sometimes too, I'm like, do I really want to publish this and show really my inabilities here in this episode or not? But that's where we learn. I mean, like you say, like we not only learn from ourselves in those experiences, but we also learn from other people, which is not a bad thing. It's a great way for us to grow in our abilities, by learning from other people who can give us advice as well, in our flaws, because none of us are perfect. There's always room for improvement. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and everyone is on a learning curve. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we always have to look at our present conditions. That's what we start our development from, not
Mm-hmm.
from who we were yesterday,
Mm.
but actually today. So today's training session, okay, what is my conditions right now? Is my body fully functional, and so on? So this
Mm-hmm.
is all what we need to look at. And so therefore, you know, exposing yourself in front of others during a competition, if that your most limiting factor, then you have to focusing on, you know, try to be and train you to be more relaxed during
Mm-hmm.
these situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, the biggest part of a battle in a race is your mindset in a lot of ways. And so your mind can completely change the whole experience of a competition, or even just paddling on the water. You're going out by yourself,
Yeah.
maybe you're going out on a little choppier day for the first time. The same thing. If you're not keeping relaxed and focused on being present in the moment, then you're going to tense up and you're going to get more stress, and you have a hard time actually applying the skills that you know how to do to handle those conditions by being
Yeah.
stressed out about the situation you're in. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And this I think is it's, you know, due to expectations we have, or it's actually our brain is programmed in this way. So expectation is what more or less limiting us in most ways. And if we try not to have too many expectations of our performance and others and so on, that will help us a lot, and that will help so many people actually to not be afraid of trying new things. So if we show more of our, you know, bad efforts, more
Mm-hmm.
people feel relaxed and also will go out there and try new things.
No, exactly. Exactly. So even with that being said, I'm sure, I know for myself, I'm sure even you work on things too. What's something nowadays that you're working on to improve yourself in? So obviously we're all in a learning journey, continue to grow and learn from our own personal mistakes or abilities and learn from other people. So what's something right now that you're working on that you feel like you're trying to improve in your personal paddle experience?
I can say it like this. We developed this training tool we call Indoor SUP
Mm-hmm.
a couple of years ago. And last year, I tried to, you know, all my work is based on testing stuff, testing, you know, behaviors, testing products, testing new training methods and stuff like that. So, you know, just the feeling of something doesn't say much, because feelings are quite, they don't really tell the truth all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how our reflexes work in many ways. But so I need actually to test. I need to see some data. That's how I can see that it works or not. So last year I started to do some testing of this training tool. And, you know, what I've realized through the years was that the average speeds in stand-up paddling is the same. It's not improving, more or less. In some cases, even dropping.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to think about why this was actually, and then I started to realize that we train more today. We are getting more specialized in stand-up paddling. We train more on water. We train more hours and in different types of water and so on. But we don't really improve. So why was this? And what I've seen is that we're becoming better and better to handle ourselves on the paddleboard, but we're not in control of the board. We're just, following or better to handle the motion of the board itself. And so I thought that I was quite, light-sided. I had a good balance and so on. But indoor SUP, there you stand on a solid surface, a firm surface, and you pull these rubber bands on either the left side or the right side of your body. That means that you try to always find an equal pressure on your soles of your foot or feet. And that is very difficult to do when you're out on the water, because the water gives way all the time. So if you lean on one side, the board will be tilting to that side. And that meaning that it's very hard to detect any flaws in your techniques or in your function of your body. But standing on this firm surface and have a very light resistance, so you really just can feel the motion that you do on the left side, that muscle group or that specific muscle that you're working. It's just that's activated. That meaning that the whole every other part of your body needs to be completely still. So I did that I did tests for more or less close to 100 hours this winter, just on that. So I wasn't even out on the board on water during this period. But when I got back on the water, it felt like I never had been away. And it also helped me to control the board much, much better. And now when I've been out on the water again, I tried to change. So one day of indoor SUP and one day of paddling on the water, just to be able to feel a bit more about what's happening on the water and how I can control it there. So I think this is going to help me to develop in stand-up paddling. So I don't want to say too much yet, because I will have this year as well to work more in detail with it.
No, exactly. And I'm excited to talk more as well as in the later series about the indoor SUP and the aspects that can really help you. Because like you're saying, it's interesting for me to hear to hear from your story. As you said, this past 100 months, just only doing indoor SUP and then get back on the water again, you feel like you never skipped a beat. Like that's really impressive. That's what a lot of people want as well. Like I said, it's not all about just getting the cardio workout out of like an indoor truck training school, but also more about the technique and how technique can still allow you to not miss a beat when you go step back on the water again as well. So yeah, I'm super. Yeah, you want to say something about that, or we talk more about that later? But
yeah, I can just say that this is actually, people think that strength training that means a lot of resistance. That means, okay, get stronger, I need to lift heavier weights, more or less. But in this case, if you don't even know how to activate the muscle, or even to shut that down when you don't want it to be activated, that's a certain skill, and that also a type of strength training. Strength training is more or less about signals and finding the right muscles and gradually working them until they need more resistance. But in this case, it's about less resistance, much less resistance than we think.
Mm.
And that will actually help us to get much more effective. The power transmission will be much better when we can actually do these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm definitely excited to talk way more on that topic as well later on. Because like I said, it's a big eye opener, I think, when people don't realize that when we can transfer more of that force and energy into the real direction we want to go to on the water, it makes a big difference. Like I was saying, we can have that force, we can have that energy, but if it's not applying us or allowing us to go in the direction we want to go, or losing it due to balance or other issues, like we're losing that potential power we could have. So yeah, it's super interesting to dive more in that. So I want to save it for another episode though, because we can go deep into that, I feel like, and talk way more about that topic. And so
And just to explain here that what we've seen through the test with we call it field test, so meaning out on the water, we've seen that everyone, amateurs to elite paddlers, the more you pull, the more in the wrong direction you go. That's I would say explain it in the best way.
yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I love that story. I love how like you also just started at a starting point as well. And then moving into world of stand-up paddle boarding, but even nowadays you're still continuing to test things and push the boundaries, which I appreciate as well, because a lot of times we can just look at one person or 1 year of people getting involved in racing or coaches and just think like, all right, this is the way we all got to do it now. Like this person's doing this way, we all got to do it. And the reality is we all got to test it out ourselves and see like why is that person actually doing it the way they're doing it and what works well for our body. But even like thinking outside the box sometimes, even of training or technique, like this sport is obviously still newer and growing. And so it's exciting to try new things that maybe have not been done before, try a different technique that's never been tried before, and just not saying it's right or wrong, but simply going out there, just saying and testing that and putting that to the data to see what really is making a difference. And so I love that about your story, because you're someone who does that. You're not someone who just goes after the next fad. You're someone who wants to see, all right, what actually makes us faster? Because like I said, we want to see improvements in the sport over the coming years to see what can we actually do to make us get faster on the water, kind of a thing. And so, yeah, that's super exciting.
And it's also so individual. We need to understand that everything is based on my present conditions, my body constitution, type of muscle fibers, and so on, and also the equipment. So everything needs to be analyzed based on you, no one else, because the only one that we're going to develop is you, or me in that case. So if we try to compare ourselves with others, we're quite soon lost, because others have other conditions and so on to work from.
Exactly. And that's probably one of the biggest things I learned in my journey too. So I'll share some more of my story too. When I first started paddleboarding, it was in 2017, so it wasn't super long ago. Same thing, I saw some people doing on the water. I was actually at a friend's house in his lake, and he has some super small boards. Like they're probably less than 100 liters in volume. They're just like from cheap boards from Walmart and just for kids. And so I got on the board, obviously sinking below my feet. It was impossible to stand up on. And I was just trying like to stand for probably 2 seconds before I fell again with a paddle in my hand, and just had the hardest time with it. But even then, like it was just something fun. I think I just enjoyed just trying the challenge of something new. And at that time, there was zero expectations. I was just going out there with some friends to have a fun time in the water, so that helped quite a bit too. But that was my first exposure to paddleboarding. And then it wasn't until probably almost a year later in 2018 when I actually got into or on a proper size paddleboard and a proper first experience in the water. At that point, we already had moved to Mexico. I was living in Puerto Vallarta at the time. And once again, saw some people in the water paddling. And I was like, oh, those boards look a little bit bigger than the last board I used. Maybe that's better for you. And so I got on this bigger board, rented a board from this company. And yeah, had a way better second experience, fell way less because I was on a much more stable paddleboard below my feet. Still a challenge. I don't come from a surfing background. I come from the Midwest life in the United States, so in the middle of the country, where we just have lakes and rivers. And so zero background in surfing or anything like that. So the whole entire concept of balancing on a board on the water was brand new to me. But I love the experience. I love being outside, and the water is something new for me. So I enjoy the newness of being on the water as well. And at
Yeah.
that point, I was on the ocean also. So I've only ever learned from my past, mostly on the ocean water conditions, which is those of you who have been in the ocean know it's much more challenging to learn on the ocean than it is versus a lake, because just you have the movement of the water is way different in the ocean versus a lake. They can be
Yeah.
very similar at times, but a lot of times it's also very different. But yeah, after I got that first experience of renting a board, I was like, this is pretty cool. Like I can see I could learn some things here and I could have some fun. And so after I rented that board, I went out later and found guess a cheaper paddle board. I think my first board was from Costco. So I got that board, a paddle, and they're in Mexico. There were just limited options for paddle boards to get there as well. And so I could take what I could get, and got on the water to learn from that experience. And yeah, fell a lot over those next coming months of just trying to learn how to stand on this thing, how to paddle, and quickly learned that I needed someone to help me in this journey as well. But before I did my first lesson, I actually did my first race at the end or in 2019.
Okay.
And so for this first race there in Mexico, it was like dynamic race. I'll kind of get the settings for this race. It wasn't just like a 6K race in the water. Like we did like 100-meter obstacle course first on the beach. So we ran through some ropes, went through like under some stuff, over some things. Then we jumped in the water and swam around a buoy, came back, and we grabbed our paddle board, but without the paddle, just the paddle board, got
Okay.
back in the water, swam prone style around the buoy, back to the beach start, grabbed our paddle, went back in the water, and then paddled 6K and then came back for the end of the race. And so I was beat. I got it down the race and I was like, oh, this hurts so bad. Like, why does anybody want to do this sport? And I
Sounds like
did it.
a CrossFit session. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a full like yeah, CrossFit session, working all the body muscles, and I'm not a swimmer, so that swim killed me as well. But yeah, and I did it on my all-around paddle board. That board I think was like 11 feet 2 inches long by like 33 inches wide. So a good sized board, and I just did the best I could do to get out there and paddle this distance. But I just remember when I was done that first race, like, wow, this
Yeah.
hurt. That was uncomfortable. At right after that race ended, I was like, never again am I doing that to my body again. Of course, I was zero experience of training or anything like that. I was just showing up and doing it. But as you've probably seen my journey, I've since done races since that time. So obviously my mindset changed. And just like you, I think it really changed for me when I learned just how much more there is to learn behind this sport, in terms of correct technique and movement on the water and how you can enjoy that experience. And so after that, I took my first class with a company there, from Surf Mexico, in Buenos Aires, Mexico, next to Puerto Vallarta, and got certified through them later on through an accreditation through Australia through ASI, and learned so much from my experience through that company of ASI of learning how to do proper technique on the water, learning how to be safe in the water, learning proper equipment to use in terms of paddles and boards and how that affects your experience on the water. And I really enjoyed that's kind of what sparked it for me after those courses was my passion for wanting to learn and grow and learning that the well is deep. Like there wasn't just like this shallow well where you learn these few things and you're just good to go. Like that's all you need to know for paddleboarding. Like no, like the well is deep and I can't even see the bottom of the well. And that's like, all right,
Okay.
that's
Not
where I
me.
want to be. Like that's where I want to learn. That's where I want to grow because I love a place where the growth is continual. Like we call it, I like to call it lifelong learning. And so I
Yeah.
love the process of lifelong learning with paddleboarding that provides to continue to grow in that process. And so my journey has been in stages throughout the years since that time. I've been growing through paddleboard. So I gained my experience on one board. I moved to a narrow board. Eventually got my first inflatable race board. Did that for quite a while because that's once again I had limited access to what I could access here in Mexico. And then got my first hard race board. I guess it was only last year, which is crazy. I feel like I've been on for a while now, but it really has not been that long. I got my first proper hard carbon fiber race board, which is great. But obviously this the journey, like you usually don't just start off on that kind of a board. And so I've been in a journey of all around paddle boards to inflatables to where I am now on a proper race board. But it's been quite the journey experience of learning, growing, failing a lot, falling a lot. When I progress, for example, to a more narrow
Yeah.
board, yeah, I get on it. I'm like, how does anybody ride this thing? Like, I'm just like falling off the side, like side to side on this race board. Like, it's so unstable. Like, there's no way I can ride this thing. And obviously, over time, you get more practice, more progression in your technique, and it becomes natural to do and feels so stable now. But yeah, it's all a matter of perspective. And so, um, my journey is nowhere near ending, is so much more deeper. And that's what I love about it. And that's what I love, like you said, like the learning experience behind it is so great.
Exactly. That's, you know, it's the same still. And I've been doing this for like 15 years now. And funny you said about the boards there, because the first board, when we wanted to try to analyze the movement, standing paddle movement, we actually developed a board that was a 12.6 at that time, and 20 inches wide and totally round bottom. So just, you know, that will, you know, then it's not the board that will limited what we're looking at. But the problem was that I could paddle it for 5 strokes and then went into water. And I think it took me like 2 months or something to learn how to paddle that for maybe 45 minutes. But then it's the same. At certain points, you can get up in a good speed. But most of the times you were compensating so much about the balance. So that slowed the fully type of stroke down. So what you were limited by the instability.
Yeah.
Meant that you couldn't really see how the movement actually worked.
Yeah. There's all that trial and error. And a lot of times too, as beginners, like we're limited even just by our own bodies, our own body not used to using those balance muscles that we use on a paddleboard and things like that. Like, sure, we may have the knowledge to do a certain thing while we're on the water, but the reality, especially when we're beginners, like your body has to adapt and learn to apply that knowledge, and that doesn't just happen in one paddle session.
Not really. And and the fun part of stand-up paddling still, I think, is that it's so little studies done about it. So everything we discover more or less is pieces of gold, as I see it. We learn so much from every new data that we get, and that's why it's so important that we share these things among each other, because then that will help the sport to develop. It's not just, you know, one person saying that this is how it should be done. It's based on everyone's experiences, more or less. So that's why I think it's so great to interact with each other and discuss these things that we've seen in other sports. That's how they developed. You know, we teach each other.
Yeah, exactly. And for that concept as well, would you say that paddleboarding is for everybody or for all ages, or who would you say this sport is mostly for? Because some sports, there's certain body types, there's certain people who can do the sport really and get enjoyment out of it. But would you say that exists for paddleboarding, or you say that is not the case for paddleboarding?
It's not the case for paddleboarding. I would say that why I stayed so long in stand-up paddling is because I more or less never seen something as functional that stand-up paddling is. Because it's, you know, it's so very gentle moment because of the water. It gives way. There's no shock forces on the body. That means that, and it provokes our balance all the time, meaning that every muscle that we have, the brain has shut off because we don't use that in our everyday life. Meaning that these muscles get activated again, meaning that we use more of our body in our everyday life, we will also take up the way the load from our body weight, meaning that our whole body gets stronger by just getting more and more muscles involved again. So that will help people that disabilities, and it will help older people and so on. And we also seen that, you know, because in other water sports like rowing or kayaking and so on, we had foot support. So when we pull the paddle or the oars, we have something to pull against. But in stand-up paddling, it's our own balance, meaning that the transmission from stand-up paddling over to other activities is so much greater. And that's why I love it so much, because it helps me to develop, and it helps my clients in whatever sport to develop.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, it doesn't matter whether you're a kid who's just starting the sport, learning the very first time the concepts of stabilizing on the water, or you're more advanced in your years and you're learning to re-engage those abilities, like those muscle groups, to, like you said, like literally just improve your everyday life in terms of just functioning in your work or your daily activities. Like, it really just improves your overall health in a lot of ways. And really, I feel like it just does it in more, like you said, a full body perspective, where it's not just necessarily the muscle groups and things like that, but even just conditioning on the water. Like paddleboarding is as we all know, a full body workout. And so it's such a great full body like package, where not only growing and strengthening muscles that you need to do that you normally can't strengthen when you're off the water. You can do it on the water, but also get good cardio training on the water. And once again, just improving your overall your health, your heart, and your mentality, even off the water, which is incredible. And I feel like a lot of people probably attest that if they share their personal stories as well, in terms of just how they feel even off the water. Has that been the case for you too, or how do you feel when you're done paddleboarding?
Yeah, one of the first things that got me also frustrated was because I wanted to analyze it. Meaning that I wanted to see what muscles I'm working with here. So I tried to pull as hard as I could to see where I would get tired. But you know, that was the whole body all the time.
Yeah.
I couldn't never feel specific muscle I was working with. So, you know, the feeling getting out of the water, you know, all the air, the humidity of the water and everything, it gets you so reset. So you felt totally fresh again. And what I hear from the elite athletes that now using stand-up paddling as a training activity, they say that when they have had a hard competition period or a hard training period, when they go out and use stand-up paddling, they come back in and they're totally fresh again. And then they use it in the right way, I would say. They're not using it, you know, to go hard. They go out there paddling, just relaxing, get the blood flow and everything, and you know, are totally recovered afterwards. So more or less, that is the same thing I feel, I would say.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like I said, it's definitely a full body workout, and you get down on the water. And so, like I said, sometimes it gets frustrating. We just want to focus on one side, which is, as we said before, why we love Indoor SUP. So we can do that as well through the training of Indoor SUP.
Yeah, and these things here, you know, we can see that waters. I as a climber, I've been a climber for all my life, and the vertical environment, it takes every focus, because if you do something wrong, you can injure yourself quite badly. And the same with water. Through the evolution, we see water as a potentially dangerous environment, meaning that all our senses get sharpened to be aware, meaning that every everyday problem we have, when we get out on the water, we cannot think about them. That meaning that we get recovered from these problems, that tension that these problems gives us.
So you're saying through our time on the water, we gain almost a stronger mind because we're able to adapt and process more what's going around us, and also helps us off the water then too. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So the brain is programmed in that way that it cannot focus on these things. So if we are in the same environment, on land all the time, we can always think about these problems. So that's why most people, they like very intense training, because then they get so tired, and tiredness have the same effect. We cannot longer think about what issues we have to deal with. But in the long term, only working with high intensity workouts, meaning that is not what we need. We need to go much more low intensity work most of the times to actually get stronger. That meaning that if we can do low intensity work in environments like water, where the brain is still focusing on what they're doing right now, not the problems we have besides.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And yeah, creating that stronger mind, stronger body really works together. And really the mind first. If your mind's not strong, your body's not going to get strong either. And so, yeah, that's why it's really important.
And this also in stand-up paddling, we've seen that this is one of very, very few activities that actually relearn the body to cooperate between our stabilizing muscles and our mobilizing muscles, meaning mobilizing muscles that we can move our legs and arms and so on. And the stabilizing muscles is what keeps our skeleton upright. And these have to work together for us to get a much better power transmission in whatever we do, like running or cycling or skiing or whatever.
Yeah, do you feel like stand-up paddleboarding has improved other sports you enjoy doing for even just leisure activities? Do you feel like it's improved those as well, or do you feel like you haven't seen improvement?
We have seen a lot of improvement. So there's so many things I can go into in detail here, but one of the first things we realized was that we got a better running step or stride based on stand-up paddling, which sounds very low. And what we saw here is that this proprioceptive system that feels the length of the muscles and how a joint or the load on the joint, and feel where the center of gravity is. That gets so much more activated when we just stand on a paddleboard on water. Meaning that when this, because why most people don't have a very high activated proprioceptive system is because we're sitting down so much. We don't need to use our balance in that way. That meaning when we are walking or running, the brain wants the center of gravity to be in between our feet, meaning that all the time the energy goes like inward. We get very like this when we walk. But we're actually designed for using and have the balance on one foot, because when we walk or run, we stand on one foot for most of the time. So we saw that we got much more effective because we stayed longer on the pushing leg when we were running after paddling. Because it feels more stable when you're back on land than it did on the board. Therefore, you get more relaxed and the brain get more relaxed.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, I never would have thought about paddleboarding where I'm standing still on my board and can improve my running on land. But it makes sense, like you're saying. Yeah, the paddleboarding will definitely improve that area of your muscle groups to improve your stride as well. Like you said, standing or more power for a longer period of time and not pushing foot. That's super interesting. And yeah, I kind of want to go back out and test it now, see if my runnings are actually improved over the years or not from paddleboarding.
And there's also one thing here that most people forget to see. Okay, to how can we actually scan progression? And that's why we need to focus on test ourselves at specific times, or else it's very, very difficult to see if there's happening. It's just based on a feeling. If you're okay with that, then it's okay. But if you really want to see that this, something have happened, then you need to test it.
So there's a lot of tests we could do then with that. So say someone wants to see if they're let's say they're trying to see if they're making improvements in their top speed. What would it be like? What would it be a reoccurring test you to that person to see if they're actually making progress or not?
The first thing I would say here is that, we look at speeds in stand-up paddling, but we can achieve quite high speeds, based on the 14-foot board and stuff like that. But usually that speed is in the wrong direction. So it actually doesn't really mean anything. But if we can control the board and go in a straight line, that's the important speed. So if you, when we did a lot of tests, like 100 meters, people, went all out, and they actually paddle up to like 106 meters in 100 meters. Because the board, the jaw effect of the board.
Interesting. Yep. Yeah.
That meaning the first thing we need to do is be able to controlling the core stability. So when you can do that, then you can start to analyze your speed. That meaning that we can do that a lot of different ways. Good way that we look at for developing elite paddlers is that we try to see what's happening in a certain heart rate zone or intensity zone. So, okay, so if you paddle in zone 1, meaning your heart rate is between 55 and 72% of your maximum heart rate. So when you keep that for a while, then try to measure what speed you're in and what stroke rate you have. So based on training, then you can increase the speed and actually decrease the stroke rate, but still be in the same heart rate. So.
That's a good testing to do. Yeah, like you said, usually we're trying to improve one area, we actually have to backtrack to another area to actually improve the area we want to improve in. And it's just like you're saying, like for those that's like trying to improve in our 200-meter sprint or whatever, like just like you're saying, if we're paddling 210 meters, we're really just paddling more distance, and so we're really not getting faster. So it's the fastest way to get faster with actually being faster is actually just paddling less distance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the first thing. And in stand-up paddling, it's so accumulating resistance. Higher the speed, the more the resistance. That means that if we then go too far than we need, then it's there's something else we need to work on, not our strength.
Exactly. I totally relate this too, because I recently just did a race over this past weekend, and for the 10K section, I was with a guy. We did some drafting off each other, and there's so many times and I'll draft somebody, and we're just like zigzagging back and forth. Just for a longer distance race too, when maybe your end goal isn't quite inside, you're obviously gonna do some drifting, but some people will still they'll stroke on one side and you'll just like drift to that side, like switch to the other side. It's like, man, it's like drafting is nice because obviously it makes it easier. It's supposed to make it easier for the person behind them drafting for less resistance, but sometimes you're just adding miles to your distance too, following this other person's. I was just thinking that too. It's like I'm trying to make it easier, but I don't know if I'm actually making it easier for myself or not doing this.
That's actually one of the problems with stand-up paddling. Most of the races been, mass starts. So that's an effect of that. So if we have more individual races or time trials, that will improve the sport faster, I would say. based on you then, instead of basing your capacity on someone else, because you can win a lot if you compete with people that are worse than you.
No, exactly. And yeah, it's part of the sport too, is people like can't, it's hard to compare previous races with your current races because, as you said, every race is so different in terms of how many people are at a mass start line and things like that. And so I was telling Sony today is like this last race for me, like wasn't really about PR my 10K time getting a new record. It's more of just surviving because there was literally over 100 other canoe and kayakers on the water in the same race. So there's no way you're gonna, like you said, like be able to have the perfect line or get around a turn faster because you have all these other paddles you're trying to work around. And so it's part of the fun of the sport, but also, like you said, it's part of the challenge is that we can't really see real improvements in our personal abilities because we're always, each race, we're trying to deal with the new factors of that race and its limitations. So it's really hard to like see real improvements where I'm coming from a running background. And so when I ran a university at tracks, like I had the same lane to stay in for my race, the same kind of conditions other than obviously wind or rain and stuff like that. But usually the same amount of distance exactly. I had my own space to run in. I wasn't gonna be like pushed away or pushed around unless it was like a longer race and sure you're alongside other people. But typically the conditions were more or less pretty similar to the same, where you could like really see improvements race to race if you're actually becoming a faster paddler or a runner. And but now with paddleboarding, I think it's my frustration is like I love personal development. I love seeing how I'm growing. And so I love the community side of sport and races where we get to have fun on the water together. But from a personal side, I'm like, it's frustrating because I can't really go out to my next race and expect to see improvements on my abilities because I'm limited by the type of water I'm paddling in, whether it's there's current or no current or wind or no wind and people I'm paddling around. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the things I'd love to see how the sport's developed. Is there a way to make it, like I said, more streamlined and more almost fair to the athletes to see real improvements for themselves versus just, you said, just trying to paddle around the person next to you and just be better than them, but rather actually be better than yourself. And so
it's not the result, it's more or less your own performance and being able to focus on what you're doing and what you have trained. So that's not, it's not based on someone else, it's based on you. And that's the important thing to keep in mind here, I would say.
Yeah, I know we talked about in a previous conversation too, is like really the close thing we have to as of right now is like the 200-meter sprints, where in some places like the ICF does a good job of like dividing lanes up kind of thing that they do for the canoes. And that's really the closest thing we have in terms of like your individual space, usually on flatter, calmer water, to really see if you're making improvements from your personal perspective. Because the other races, tech races and distance races, yeah, the factors and things around you are always different place to place. So
yeah, and if you want to perform during races, then you need to focus on yourself during your training to see what's your levels at and so on, and your capacity, and then you need to try to look at these in the competition environment and look what's happening there and how is that, how can I handle that in that environment. So that's another part of the training. So we can take it wherever we want, more or less, but it's still our own journey and our own personal development that matters. It's the key here.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like it's kind of a good way to wrap up this episode too, is just sharing how, as like we want to say our personal stories as well. Like it's all our personal journey in this sport and growing. Like we're all here to not only become better paddlers in the water, but also just become more healthy as well off the water. And so it's all about our journey and the goals we're trying to achieve, whether someone's goal is just to be better physically fit, then now they can work on those goals. There is a way in this sport for them to focus on that goal and become better, just physically healthy and fit on and off the water. But if someone's goal is to push themselves faster and to try to improve their personal times and improve their technique, there's a way for that as well. And so it's so great. I think in this sport, as we're sharing our stories too, is that all of our stories are different and all of our goals can be different, but we still can enjoy the same sport of paddling to achieve those individual goals. And that's what I think was so great about this sport, is it's so so broad, but yet in that broadness, we can still achieve the goals we're trying to achieve, which are very specific. And that's what's great about it. So we can all enjoy that journey. We can all find enjoyment achieving the things we're trying to achieve in, and share a commonality of being on the water still together in our own journeys through this sport, and enjoy that process. And so I know for myself, I'm sure for you as well, like that's why we love it. We love diving into this deep well, and that person's well can be that well of healthiness or fitness, or that well can be the focus on technique and performance and speeds, like whatever that is. That well runs deep, and it's a lifelong journey. And as we said earlier, like you can be in your 70s and 80s or even more, and doing this sport still and seeing benefits of it, and literally enjoying time on the water, but also just enjoying life off the water, and the benefits your body sees from that sport too. And so, yeah, before we kind of close out this episode, is there anything else you're wanting to share from today's episode, or anything like that from you, Magnus?
Yeah, I would say what will help us develop this is questions from the paddlers. That's and if they want to see something be tested, because I look at everything and try to see everything about paddles, boards, been tested. I think it's probably around 110 race boards since 2012, just to be able to learn something from different boards. And same with paddles, different types of blade sizes, paddle length, and distance between hands, everything. What is best for me right now for what circumstance. So
exactly. Yeah, for the series, for those who are listening and watching, like we're gonna do some episodes too where we just answer questions from you guys, because as Matt was saying, we want to help you all where your journey's at in your paddleboarding too, and help you grow in your journey, and also so we can learn from you. As we said, we're not perfect either, so we love learning from you guys as well. So in the future episodes, we will be doing some episodes focused even just more on that and your questions for us. And so through these series, or even after today, if you have questions or things you want us to talk about, feel free to leave those in the comments down below, or send me an email at contact@ethan-huff.com. I'll leave that down in the notes below as well. Send me an email and we'll talk to you. Hope we can answer those questions for you guys. And as I said today, it was just more about sharing our stories, sharing about the journey of paddling and kind of where it's going. And yeah, in the next few episodes, we'll continue to talk about those things as well, more in detail, as well as talking more about this thing called Indoor SUP, which if you're watching, you probably see hanging on the wall here behind me, and how this tool has been new for me to use as well over these past few months, as I got to know Magnus and Kona better, and learning how to apply it to my training and the benefits that Magnus has talked about it also. So we'll talk more about, I think, Indoor SUP in the next episode, just more of the story behind it and why it was created, and hear more of that. And so stay tuned for that. But that's all we have for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you, Magnus, for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to hear from you and learn from you, so I appreciate it. So thank you.
Same to you, Ethan.
So you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.